We started this project almost 4 years ago now. We had just finished Black Flag, and we had this intention to say, how can we bring something new to AC? We wanted to modernize AC. We wanted to refresh the experience. And so we set a goal for ourselves to reinvent what it means to be Assassin's Creed. In previous ACs, the fight system was a paired animation system. What that means effectively is that when you press attack, the character avatar and an enemy would come together, almost regardless of distance, or up to 10 meters almost, play an animation and split apart. And we wanted to move away from that. If we wanted to change fight drastically, we knew we had to move away from that, so we went to a hitbox-based system. What that means is if you press attack, you're going to swing your weapon, and if something's there, it's going to get hit and take damage, and if nothing is there, well, you just swung in open air and maybe you've opened yourself up. All of a sudden what that does is it makes it so that the range of your weapon, the speed of your weapon, the position of the enemies and their loadout, their equipment, all of a sudden all of this matters. The player has two base attacks. The light attack, which is just a standard combo that you can unleash to do damage, and the heavy attack, which you can actually combo it with the light attack. The additional element of the heavy is that it can break the defense of an enemy. So if a shield is up, you can break that. If you charge it, you can put them on the ground. Enemies that are on the ground or enemies that you can get behind their back, you do bonus damage to them. From a defensive standpoint, you have a shield, which will protect you in the front, but not your back. So you have to pay attention to where the enemies are. You have a dodge to actually allow you to escape when you are completely surrounded. And the dodge you can stack up to 3 times before needing to recover from that. And you can also parry with a shield. So if you can time a perfect parry, it also stuns an enemy that allows you to do bonus damage. All these actions that you can do, they build up what we call an adrenaline meter. And as you build adrenaline, it allows you to unleash devastating attacks. So each weapon has its own unique set of attacks. Sometimes it's a singular attack, sometimes it's a chain of attacks, sometimes it's what we call Fury mode, which is a session where you have 10 seconds to unleash hell on your enemies. And Bayek is effectively raging and letting loose.
This one shows no mercy!
For melee weapons, we have 8 categories, and they play with 3 gameplay pillars effectively. It's range, speed, and the power, the damage of the weapon. As an example, the dual swords, this is by far the fastest set of weapons we have in the game. They're able to unleash a crazy amount of damage over time because of their speed, but they have super short range. Where the Spirit's really about range and it's decent damage, but it's not the fastest weapon in the game. And this one, it's really about area of effect. Are you surrounded by enemies? Do you want to use the whirlwind attack of the spear to push them away and create some space for you? And then we have our ranged weapons, so our bows. And here we have four categories of weapons, and each category has a ton of different attributes and properties, but effectively we have our warrior bow, which is kind of like a shotgun. You shoot multiple arrows at the same time. Bad for distance, but really good for up-close enemies. Then we have the rapid fire bow, which is kind of like an Uzi or a very fast pistol. If a guy has a shield up and you just want to bring his shield down very quick, shoot him in the foot, shoot him in the head, he'll drop a shield, and then you can go in with your melee weapon. We have the predator bow, which is our sniper, and then the hunter bow, which is a more classic bow type. And then within them, you have the RPG elements that come in, so attributes, properties, damage and stats and so on. When we get into the attributes of weapons and so on, having a poison-tipped spear is a very different behavior than, let's say, dual swords that can do bleeding damage, where you can hit a guy a few times and bounce out of there and let the bleeding do its thing afterwards. If you want a strong combat system and a long life of an RPG, you need a lot of challenge. You need a lot of types of enemies that can help the player really learn and master the fight system. We have a plethora of enemies. Within that, we try to have this essence of, can we make fights more unique? Can we make fights have a feeling of like almost a boss fight, even with the general enemies? And this is where we get into unique archetypes. We have variations of brutes, but effectively these are really big guys, very slow but very damaging. You don't want to be standing in front of these guys. You want to be able to get behind their back. So wait for them to make a mistake. Wait for them to take a swing, get behind their back, and then you can do a lot of damage on their back. Another enemy archetype is what we call the super. These are kind of commanders. These are elite soldiers, if you will. When they're fighting, when they're around, the other soldiers around will actually back off a bit. They'll cheer them on. They'll try to encourage their own commander. They'll still fight if you get close to them, but the idea is they show respect to this guy. You want to trick them to feel like they have an opening to get you, and then wait for them to commit to something or use your bow to stagger them. Then we have guys like the Predators. The Predators are awesome. These guys are almost like what it would be to face an assassin. These guys use smoke bombs. They try to hide inside cover. They don't want to face you directly. That's not their strength. Their strength is to hit and run. So they really try to stagger the player, to corner him, to go around and get to his back. And these are the base enemies that we have. These guys are there to help you learn the fight system, to start mastering weapons so that you can eventually start facing the ultimate challenges of the game, which are bosses.
Your mother taught me this one.
From the beginning of this project, we wanted to have epic boss fights. We have them in the main quest line, side quests, optionally just roaming in the world. It was a very important goal for us to achieve. We really pushed ourselves and how far we can go with boss fights as the ultimate challenge of our combat system. There's two main purposes to the arenas from the initial standpoint, was that they existed in Egypt during this time. So the Greeks had brought them into Egypt. And so we felt, okay, this is a super cool activity that naturally enhances our combat system and our intentions of having boss fights. And two, it was a place that we felt we can really dedicate a true fight challenge. Something that we can really handcraft, you know, bosses, waves of enemies and so on. We didn't want it to just be an activity in the world. We wanted it to be something that made sense for bármelyik to be a part of. And so the initial introduction of the arenas is through the main quest line. And as a player, if you like this type of activity, if you want the rewards and the weapons and the outfits that come from gladiator arenas, it's optionally there for you. So there are multiple arenas in the world. They start from these really small, tight, very busy and noisy little areas to grand coliseums, to something that's much more epic and grand. Sometimes you fight with specific weapons we give you. Other times you might only have a bow at your disposal in the arena. You know, it's always pits, traps, animals are sometimes used. The idea is that we're always crafting a unique fight challenge that leads you up to a unique boss. And with the unique bosses, we've put a lot of effort to make sure that they really stand out. They have a personality. Sometimes they're super aggressive. They love being out in front of the crowd, you know, blood spilling everywhere. They love that. Other times the bosses are much more subdued. We wanted to make sure that the bosses felt unique and it was exciting. We want players to play these bosses. We don't want people to ignore them. We put a lot of effort to making them really shine. And of course, there's awesome rewards. We had a very deep urge to bring something new, something that was versatile, that was highly impactful, something that was dynamic, something new to our fans who have been with us for a very long time, and exciting them. And I sincerely hope that with Assassin's Creed Origins, that we do deliver that fresh new experience that respects our fans, respects the lore, but feels very different.